guys, my name is Livy Lynn and welcome to my YouTube channel. Today we're going to be talking about 7 writing tips from Disney's Newsies. Newsies is one of my favorite Broadway musicals. And while the singing and dancing is totally magical, there are also some wonderful principles that we can take from this Broadway show and apply to our own writing. At the end of the day, it doesn't matter how talented your cast is, how catchy your songs are, or how amazing your dance numbers are. Every professional Broadway show creator knows that at the end of the day, the most important thing is story. Story lies at the heart of every film we watch, every book we read, and even every song that we listen to. By analyzing your favorite songs, movies, TV shows, and even your favorite Broadway shows, you can take some of these principles, and if you start to train your mind to be on the lookout for them, you'll see them popping up everywhere. The more you learn about writing and developing and strengthening your craft, the easier it will become to examine some of your favorite stories and see how the professionals do it. If you've never seen the Broadway version of Newsies, you need to check it out. You can watch it on Netflix, which I may or may not have watched like 7 or 20 times. Are you ready to get started? I sure hope so, because I've been listening to Newsies music all morning, and if we don't get started soon, I might just start dancing around the living room. Tip number 1, learned from Disney's Newsies. Give your main character a goal or a dream. You guys, this is so important, and sadly a lot of amateur writers don't know how important this is. I was the same way when I started writing. I would create these very vanilla cookie cutter characters, and I would put them in epic situations and crazy plots. Now, crazy plots are lots of fun and they're interesting, but if you don't have characters with substance, your story falls to the wayside. I know different authors have different perspectives about this. Some people are more plot driven and some authors are more character driven, but I personally believe that it's very important to focus on your characters. Newsies does an amazing job with this with their main character, Jack Kelly. From the outside looking in, Jack appears to be just another typical cookie cutter bad boy. He was orphaned as a child, so he has this whole sob story where he had to grow up quickly. He's got street smarts and he's independent, he can stand up for himself, and all the other orphan boys look up to him. He walks with swagger and confidence, and you can tell he thinks he's pretty cool. So from the outside looking in, he appears to be just another generic character, right? I mean, we've all seen this character done like 10 trillion times. But when you dig a little bit deeper beyond the surface, you discover who the true Jack Kelly is. We're introduced to Jack's true self as soon as the play begins. Standing on top of a balcony, looking down across New York City's beautiful skyline, Jack sings a song, and this song tells us what his true desire is. This tells us why he wakes up in the morning. It tells us what keeps him breathing and fighting through the hardest of days. As Jack belted out Santa Fe, I was hooked. Giving your character a dream gives your character so much substance. It makes them real, it makes them relatable, it makes them lovable. I have to say that if this story didn't show me this side of Jack, I don't think I would have really connected with his character.
Let me go far away, somewhere they won't never find me, and tomorrow won't remind me of today. When the city's finally sleeping and the moon's tall and gray, I get on a train that's bound for Santa Fe. And I'm done, no more running, no more lying, no more fat old men denying me my day.
But because he's a dreamer, because he has a desire that he wants more than anything, I connected with that. That told me, oh my goodness, Jack is a real human, and not only is he real, I can relate with what he's feeling. I was then committed to his story, not because he was some street smart guy who was full of himself, but because he was a human with a dream. So if you can give your main characters a dream, a desire, a passion, or a goal, your readers are going to fall in love with this person. So if you have a WIP, a work in progress, or an idea just kind of brewing in the back of your mind, or some little Pinterest boards you've been playing around with, before you get any further in plotting or planning your story, you need to stop and give your main character a dream. Alright, on to tip number 2, creating lovable side characters. Oftentimes as authors we can spend so much time on our main characters that we forget about some really important people. Our side characters. Side characters can often be bland, underdeveloped, and just not that interesting. It's not like we do it on purpose, but when we're spending so much mental time and effort and energy pouring into our main characters, it's easy to neglect the little guys, so to speak. But sometimes your side characters can be the star of your show. In Newsies, there's an entire cast of side characters that are anything but bland. The group of newsboys who have to sell newspapers all have such interesting, unique, diverse personalities.
I don't need to learn to sell papers. I got personality. It's a smile that spreads like butter. When I return to ladies' head, it's an orphan with a stutter. He's also kind and dead.
And even though you never really get to know any of them on a deeper level, they're still so much fun. You can tell that every single one of these characters were so highly developed. My guess is that the actors who played these individual newsies all decided to take their character to the next level. I'm sure because they're actors, they all had very unique, interesting backstories that they had created in their mind for the character they played. In drama, everything you do has a purpose. Everything that your character does, they do it for a reason. And it doesn't matter how small your part is, you still know your character to the core. These comedic and sometimes serious side characters definitely got my attention. So now, not only was I totally invested and interested in Jack Kelly's story, I was also invested and interested in the side characters as well, which makes the story so much more fun. I've always been a big advocate for side characters, and I really believe that they can make or break your story. In The Coronation, I have several side characters that some beta readers told me to edit out. But I followed my gut and I stuck with it, and even though some people thought they were unnecessary, I thought they were important. And apparently I was right, because I still read lots of messages from people who love certain side characters. For example, Zach Donovich from the band Kinetic Energy is a huge favorite, as well as Lance the security guard. People have asked me now for individual books just written about these characters. You know you do a good job on a side character when people are asking for more of them, and they're really not even supposed to be part of the story anyway. But just like in life, everyone has a role and everyone matters, and I think it's important to show that in your side characters. Tip number 3 from Disney's Newsies is to have a save the cat moment. A popular phrase in Hollywood and in screenwriting is save the cat. Basically, all that means is show your character doing something heroic. Especially if you have a character who may have some qualities that are not totally likable. For example, Jack Kelly is a little rough around the edges. Like I said, he's cocky, full of himself, and a major flirt. Again, not the type of character I would naturally gravitate towards. But because they gave Jack a dream and an epic save the cat moment, I was all for following this guy around. Crafting a great save the cat moment is really important, because it shows that your character, despite the fact that he has flaws, he still is a good person. He still has a desire to do good. This is important, especially if you have a villain who you're going to have a redemptive moment and transform later down the road. Giving these little glimpses into their heart of tenderness and compassion and just really general humanity is so important. In Newsies, Jack's save the cat moment was when he befriended Les. He decided to take this young, new Newsies under his wing. He probably saw a little version of himself in this guy. He thought back to the days when he first started living on the streets and things were hard for him, and he wanted to help this little boy out. And I mean, what's not to love about someone wanting to help a little child? That's very important. That's great for your save the cat. Whether you have your character help a little old lady across the street, volunteer at a nursing home, fundraise to save the whales, or just show extra kindness to a character when they're being bullied. There are lots of successful and touching ways that you can create your own save the cat moment. Again, it's important for your hero or heroine if you're going to show their weaknesses, especially if they're weaknesses that could potentially really hurt other people. If your main character starts hurting other people and we don't know why, it can be really, 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 really frustrating, and you just want to beat up the main character rather than love them like you're supposed to. If your audience gives up on your main character before they reach their character arc, you're in big trouble. So don't forget your save the cat moment. Tip number 4, the decision bomb. There comes a point in every story where your main character must make a decision. In Newsies, Jack is confronted with a troubling realization that there is a giant, there is a Goliath that he needs to take down in order for him to be okay and for his friends. The unfairness and injustice of the situation has him fed up. And because of this, he needs to decide whether he's just gonna roll over and take it and get bulldozed, or if he's going to stand up and start a strike. Obviously, he chooses to fight. He chooses to start the strike, which we sing about for the next 30 minutes. Marching around demanding the Goliath come down gets me pumped up. Seriously, it does. Because of Jack's character, he made the decision to fight. Was that the right decision? It was only the right decision because it was Jack's character making the decision. If you had a completely different character in Jack's place in this story, let's say it was someone named Louis, and let's say Louis is timid and shy, and the idea of starting a strike would totally terrify him. Obviously, Louis would choose not to start a strike. He would face that decision bomb and he would decide not to do it. Would that be okay? Where would your story be? Actually, that would be okay, because as long as Louis is making a decision that's congruent with his character, that's all that matters. When the decision bomb comes, your character can either choose to go for it or to pull back. And depending on your character's personality, it could go either way. If your character decides to pull back in fear, you are later going to give them another opportunity to face that decision bomb again. Oftentimes in stories, you see a decision bomb popping up twice, sometimes even 3 times if the character really, really needs to develop a lot before they decide to just go for it. But Jack's character, because he was already very bold and determined and ready to fight, he immediately chose to fight. Are you beginning to see why it's so important that you know your character? Not every character would choose that same thing if they were faced with that same decision bomb. So the situations that you set up for your story needs to make sense for that character. If you have timid little old Louis who comes to this decision bomb and all of a sudden just breaks out and decides, yes, we're going to fight, yes, we're going to start a strike, and he's been shy and terrified his entire life and you gave him no reason to step forward, then that would be incongruent with his character. But if you had him say no, if you had him back up in fear, and then something bad happened, and then, he grew, and then he discovered the strength that was hidden inside of him, and then he finally decided at the next decision bomb that he had to do it, and he forced himself into it, then wow, what a story that would be. Basically, at every decision bomb, your character needs to decide whether they are going to fight or flight. Tip number 5, expose their weakness. You want your character to grow. You want to create an arc where they overcome their weaknesses. But in order for them to overcome their weaknesses, they have to face their weaknesses. They have to realize that they have them. The weaknesses have to be thrown in their face, and they have to figure out a way to overcome it. In Newsies, Jack's weakness comes when Pulitzer fights back, pounds them into the ground, and Crutchy is severely hurt. Jack's best friend has been attacked. Crutchy is drugged back to the refuge, and Jack knows how terrible it is there. The thought of his friend being in pain, the thought of Crutchy suffering every day and him being completely helpless to do anything, that was some major weakness thrown in his face. He realized that he wasn't David. He couldn't take down Goliath on his own, and choosing to strike had only made things worse. Things always get worse before they get better. Am I right? That's just a natural law of life. When you fight for something that you believe in, there's going to be opposition, there's going to be attack. And when this opposition pushed back against Jack, he cracked. He was okay with risking his own life, but he was not okay with risking the lives of his friends. So when you really think about it, Jack's greatest strength was also his greatest weakness. His strength was that he loved his friends. He would do anything for his friends. He would start a strike for his friends. But at the same time, he loved his friends so much that he wasn't willing to push through to see what he wanted to come to pass. Perfect example of taking a character trait, turning it into a double-edged sword, and showing both the good sides and bad sides of loyalty. So after fighting for a while, everything went down the tubes and Jack was ready to revert to his dream. He was ready to forget all of this and go back to his original plan in life, which was to move to Santa Fe. The dream served as a crutch in his mind. It was a safe place. It was a place that he could return to amidst all the chaos and turmoil. As he talked about going to Santa Fe, his friends came back and reminded him what they were truly fighting for. They reminded him that this was so much bigger than him. It was so much bigger than the Newsies. It was so much bigger than themselves. It's about child labor and freedom and justice for every kid who is being oppressed. All of a sudden, the fight was worth fighting again because it was bigger than just them. That was when Jack made a selfless decision, and that was the moment he became a hero. Tip number 6, the big betrayal moment. Because of the values that Jack held in his heart, because of his perspective concerning friendship and Crutchy and everything that was going on, he decided that Crutchy's safety was more important than winning this war against Pulitzer. And so we have the betrayal. But this wasn't just any betrayal, this was a forced betrayal. This was Pulitzer putting him in an extremely difficult situation where he had to choose this or that, and both options were terrible. If you can put your character in situations where they are forced to choose between the things that are most important to them, it makes such a good story. And the story gets even more interesting when both of those options are bad and both of them look like you're gonna lose. It just looks like the story's over, it looks like it's hopeless, and either choice is just not a good choice. So it happened in Newsies that it appeared as though Jack had betrayed everyone. This is another double-edged sword because Catherine, the reporter, who Jack was starting to fall in love with, didn't tell him, spoiler alert, that her dad was Pulitzer. She was the daughter of the enemy, and when that was revealed, that just kind of blew Jack's mind. He felt betrayed by her, and so the idea of betraying everybody else wasn't quite as intense because he was just hurt and broken, and he just wanted all this to be over. Creating a betrayal moment can be so good for your story. No, it's not necessary. You can have a great story without betrayal, but it just really sticks the dagger in a little bit deeper and it just plays on your emotional heartstrings. If you don't want a betrayal in your story, I encourage you to pick something else, like some secret that's revealed. Even if it's small, like a certain character that you thought was working for this person is actually working for that person, or the real enemy was hidden in front of their eyes the entire time. Okay, never mind. Yeah, none of that is small. Forget I said the word small. Anyway, there are lots of amazingly fun plot twists that you can add into your story that your readers will never see coming. And finally, number 7, the big reveal, aka happily ever after. Just when things keep getting worse and worse and worse and worse, and you're pretty convinced that this is not going to have a happy ending, it changes. All of the stars align and everything falls into place, but it falls into place in a way that makes sense for the characters. You guys, you can't just sprinkle the magical pixie dust of perfection and just boom, take your characters out of a terrible situation and stick them in Never Never Land. Yes, you want a happy ending for your story, but you also want it to be realistic. You want it to make sense for your characters and for the decisions and the choices that they've made so far. If it doesn't make sense for your main character to figure out a way to get them out of this mess, don't just magically give him the anointing of figuring everything out and kaboom boom, it's the end of the story. Do something that makes sense. Use a side character. Use the power of another character who perhaps has more influence than this character does. We see a perfect example of this in Newsies, when after Jack and the team did the very best that they could, they did a fantastic job, they fought as hard as they could, then you have Mr. Roosevelt come in and take things to another level. He was able to take what they had done and turn it into success. He was able to take their little story and not just make it about them, but make it about everybody. Because of the power that he had, he was able to set things into place that Jack couldn't. They shut down the refuge, and soon child labor laws were changed all across the country. Because of the stand that the Newsies took, it literally changed the world. And what I love about this story is that it's based on a true story. There really was a ragtag team of newsboys who decided to strike. And because of what they did, it changed history. Your writing can change history too. You can create a story that's about so much more than just this character. And the cool thing is that your character doesn't even have to realize that there's a bigger picture. Oftentimes your character thinks that the world revolves around them, but you as the author are masterfully weaving this much larger story, this much bigger narrative together. If you can take the heroic actions of your character and have them influence another character without them even knowing about it, that is a beautiful thing. Why? Because that's the reality of life. We all get so sucked in and focused on our own little worlds, only focusing on what we're doing and not thinking about other people. Meanwhile, the daily choices that we make and the way that we as protagonists protag and do things and head out there and change the world, it changes others. Sometimes creating your happy ending doesn't mean you tie together all the loose ends and put a bow on it. Sometimes it means you just leave people with an inkling of hope. For example, in Star Wars The Force Awakens, even though things are so crazy and chaotic and there's still oppression and there's still the Emperor and there's just so much going on that's bad, there is a glimmer of hope. One scene shows the children. It shows the little kids rising up and dreaming about their day to save the galaxy. And because of that, you know everything's going to be okay. You know that because the main characters did their job, they did their best, and even if it wasn't perfect, even if it wasn't all polished up, they still had an impact on the world around them. If you can do that, you have an amazing story on your hands. And more importantly, your real life story is influencing others as well. Alright my friends, that wraps up today's video. I hope you enjoyed watching this as much as I enjoyed creating it for you guys, and I hope you got some wonderful writing tips from it. Be sure to comment down below and let me know what you thought was most helpful or most interesting. Alright, excuse me friends, I'm going to go dance.